I want to give a disclaimer for this BTS. I want this to come across as a safe space and a platform where, in as much as I try really hard to talk about the human experience from maybe things I've witnessed or things I've heard or seen, I also don't want it to be, as they call it, a Debbie Downer. I don't want it to always be a heavy space, right? I've talked a lot about things like healing, etc., over and over again. I know you guys know. But even in healing, we all know there's moments of thriving. And I thank God. I'm very grateful for the balance that is life. And I just thought it was important to put that disclaimer so that it doesn't always feel like a space that gets too heavy. But the truth is, guys, life can be heavy and life can live. So today's is a little heavy, but it ends with a call to action about checking on each other. And I don't say that in a cliche way. We really have to check on each other. We really have to check in on people. There's been such a huge wave of grief and sickness and loneliness that's been, yes, around me, around people I love, but also around many of you. And I think what we've become good at is burying those feelings somewhere because, see, we have to keep it moving. And then on top of that, we're also trying to figure out how to make money, how to earn a living, given that there's so many more expenses to deal with. And this might sound like the weirdest thing, but I want us to remember that as long as we're still here, there is something to look forward to. There's a way to navigate it. And I don't mean to say that in a very simplistic way, but I just want to give the disclaimer that this is a space to talk about those things, but I want you to always leave with a sense that we can navigate it no matter how hard and wild it seems right now. So I just got off an interview with Baba Tanisha, as he's better known, Faustin. And his story has been out there a lot. He lost his wife and partner in a car accident, and then he was beginning to raise his daughter by himself. And we were talking about grief, loneliness, but specifically male loneliness for part of the It's Official with Janet Mbugua conversation series, which is every Friday on my YouTube. And thank you guys so much for the feedback on the first episode we uploaded, which is the rising cost of living. Now I'm doing a conversation on male loneliness, a separate one on female loneliness, and then another one on the combined epidemic of loneliness, which, let me read this statistic, according to CNN. CNN released this statistic in October 2023, so a few months ago, and it starts by saying, if you feel lonely, you're actually in good company. Nearly 1 in 4 adults across the world have reported feeling very or fairly lonely, according to a new survey. I'll read a little bit more. It says, the new survey taken across 142 countries found 24% of people aged 15 and older self-reported feeling very or fairly lonely in response to the question, how lonely do you feel? And then the survey also found that the rates of loneliness were highest in young adults, with 27% of young adults aged 19 to 29 reporting feeling very or fairly lonely. The lowest rates were found in older adults. Only 17% of people aged 65 and older reported feeling lonely. And it goes on and on and on. The survey, like I said, is called The Loneliness Epidemic, and you can find it on CNN's website. And so that's what inspired me, in a sense, to go out there and have conversations about loneliness, because I always feel that when you put a human face to it, when you validate the feelings, what you begin to find is a commonality. You almost find you don't feel so isolated in your experience. And then on top of that, you end it with having resources to cope with it. There's a lot of, I think, very powerful and important things that Faustin said. Here's a clip of one of them.
If you can't find that peace by yourself, nobody else will find that peace for you.
That is so powerful. It's true. Yeah.
If you don't accept that this is the situation, like if you change just your mindset, try to view life in another different angle.
Yeah.
Yani try to find a different angle for your situation. Then that is when you'll start to view things differently. Yani right now, in case I have any problem, the only person I run to is God first, then I'll seek anything else. Because it's only God who can give you that peace that you want. For me, I went to seek for professional help. Professional help meaning I went to nilienda kutafuta therapist wa kunisaidia.
As you can hear, he's talking about several things. What you tell your mind, the company you keep, the people who surround you, the God you pray to, God, not the God you pray to, praying to God. Therapy. Therapy was a large part of what he said. And, you know, loneliness is one of those very layered and complex feelings. And for each person, it's very different and very personal. But I also feel that it's important that he mentioned, hey, listen, because there is the data as old as time, or the social information that's known, that we hadn't always created spaces where men can talk about how they feel, that a man talking about loneliness is seen as a weakness. And by the way, this is one dimension, right? Somebody might say, well, if there's some people who deal with it in however they want to deal with it. I'm talking about their ability to express that they're feeling lonely, and, you know, even being trolled for telling his story about navigating his grief. That's why I started by saying, check in on people, but also check yourself. Check yourself if you feel that somebody narrating a lived reality is cloud chasing. I feel like we've completely clouded cloud chasing. It's there, it exists, but I think it's very dangerous if you skew it towards somebody just talking about their lived truth. And you're trolling them. People going online and pushing back is enabling even more loneliness and enabling sadness and anger and thoughts, unfortunately, and trigger alert of self-harm. So we had a conversation, and it should be up in a few weeks. We'll put the promo up and you'll have that information. We also talked to a much older man about how he's coping with loneliness and grief and being widowed. We had a few conversations on male loneliness. And like I said, we'll also do a separate one on how loneliness affects women differently. And then we'll kind of sum it up with generally the loneliness that people are carrying. And then I think the same article had some resources, right? So they said, social media is often a tool young adults use to connect with one another, but it can be more harmful than it's good if users are participating in passive scrolling. She described the behavior as only taking in the rosy posts of others and comparing it with one's reality, and suggested actively engaging instead by sharing a status update or a picture, interacting with friends' posts, or sending a private message to a friend. And then in terms of tools, right, it talks about, let me see where it says, what to do to combat loneliness. Remember, I've said we completely understand how very personal and layered the word loneliness is. But it did say, while 49% of the total adults surveyed reported not feeling at all lonely, over half had answered that they felt at least a little lonely. While being alone could be refreshing and energizing, this is what it says, being alone does not necessarily mean loneliness, and many people need to be aware of it. So be aware of the thin line between being alone. Some people take solo vacations. Some people take solo dates, like they want to be alone in that moment. They're good. Being lonely, I think, is a constant sadness and longing and yearning and urge for company, and a prison in your mind and your heart that tells you, I'm so alone in this. This is my world. I'm a prison to my mind. I don't know what else to do. So it says, making friends, volunteering, taking courses where we may meet people, learning how to be with ourselves and enjoying it as among the things that could be beneficial. Different for everyone. Some people will also say prayer and leaning on God and Jesus for, you know, for that completion of mind and spirit and that nourishment of spirit. Others get into a hobby that they begin to fall in love with and enjoy. And others just maybe want to watch a good movie or whatever it is. I'm no expert, please. I will leave some resources in the caption. But I think it's just to recognize, I started this video by saying I don't want this to be a space where it always sounds like I'm talking about super heavy things, but I do find it very important to talk about issues that on a global level, so many people are dealing with. That I think is important. What's also important is to say so many people are dealing with it, but there's tools to navigate it. And that's not me completely simplifying the issue, but it's really saying, I'm going to leave the resources I can. There's tons of other resources out there. We want you to thrive. We all want to thrive, right? We all want to reach a point of feeling like you can wake up and find joy again in life. And that may look different for everyone in a different way, in a different time and space. But when I say check in on people, there's this very famous line on check in on your close friends. Faustin mentioned something interesting when we talked. He said, sometimes it's the people who smile the most. It's actually called smiling depression. And I'll never forget, I was dealing with something so heavy in 2020, as a lot of us were during COVID. But this was just before COVID. It was in February. The lockdown came in March. And I was dealing with one of the heaviest transitions in my life, but I had a conference that I was convening. And so I was smiling because I'm on stage. And I'll never forget this one person coming up to me and saying, you know, you don't always have to, she said something like, you don't always have to pretend, or you smiling comes across like you don't have a grasp on reality. It was one of the most hurtful things because she had no idea what she was talking about and basically thought, you know, you're smiling your way through life. Yeah, it's called smiling depression. And it's not to say that some of the most beautiful smiles are not just genuine happy smiles. I'm just saying, normalize, first of all, creating the bandwidth within yourself. I've talked about this before you can create the space to check in on somebody. Hey, how you doing? Hey, I know it's been a rough patch. I'm here if you want to talk. Or again, if they're oversharing and you don't know what to do with it, it's to say, hey, I want to be there for you. How about you use this resource and let me know how it's going and let me know if there's anything else I might be able to do within my capacity. But guys, we owe it to each other to check in on each other to combat this global epidemic of loneliness, which has apparently skyrocketed 5 times more since the 90s. Loneliness is an epidemic. It's an epidemic that we can address actively, intentionally, with the right resources, with the right spaces where people posting videos like this don't have people rolling their eyes saying, oh God, how much longer are you going to talk about these things? Or without trolling, or without, it doesn't mean people are not happy when they post videos like this. They have so many good things going on in life. I'm so grateful for the most amazing things and gifts that God has given me. Doesn't mean I don't get lonely. It doesn't mean you don't get lonely. And it doesn't mean we should be afraid to admit it. Yeah, we'll leave it at that.